I'm Nadia Ely, and welcome to today's discussion about Dominion Energy's Grid Transformation Plan. The mission of this podcast series is to increase awareness about the plan and its individual programs, which aim to safely, reliably, and affordably shore up and improve our existing infrastructure and systems to better equip them for the grid of the future. This series explores the purpose and specifics of the various grid transformation programs and initiatives with monthly discussions centered around the individual programs that make up the greater grid transformation plan. To discuss an overview of the plan in more detail, our Director of Grid Resiliency, Stephen Eisenrauch, and Director of Grid Planning and Asset Management, Augustus Johnson. Thank you both for being with me. Gus, I'm going to start with you. We know that inevitably fundamental changes in the energy industry will prompt the need for utilities nationwide to modernize their distribution grids. Dominion's grid transformation plan is working to make those changes seamless. Can you give us the reasons why these changes to the grid are so necessary?
Sure, Nadia, that's a great question. There are numerous reasons that these changes are necessary. I think at a base level, we're seeing an increased penetration of distributed energy resources or DERs, which could be anything from rooftop solar to wind farms to electric vehicles to electric water pumps to thermostats, et cetera, all things leading to an increased electrification of the grid, which makes the resiliency, the reliability of the distribution system and the grid in general, which has always been critical, even more critical. In addition to that, COVID has changed the world. We're all seeing an increase in work from home, hybrid situations. We know that we've gone to that, from a permanent perspective here at Dominion. So the needs for power and for reliable power are not only on our normal times, which have been in the morning and in the evening, but it's really all day long that people expect to have good, clean, reliable power. We're also seeing technological advancements with data centers, artificial intelligence, all things that not only require power, but they require really good, clean, quality power. So all of these things are why we're looking to transform our distribution system, transform the grid, to make sure that we can not only accommodate all of these things that are now interfacing with the grid, but make sure that our customers have a good experience as well.
Thank you for that thorough answer, Gus. Steve, we hear about several grid transformation programs currently underway or are in the works. Can you walk me through these programs and their notable benefits?
I'd be happy to, Nadia. I'll let you know there's a lot here, and we'll be covering these programs in future podcasts in more detail. So I'm going to stay at a high level. So, Nadia, the first one is main feeder hardening within my group. We're taking the worst performing main feeders or three-phase lines, and we're rebuilding them to improve standards with bigger poles, shorter spans, and appropriate hardware for that line. We're trying to avoid the outages that cost us a lot of time during restoration, such as broken poles, so that we can spend less time on these main feeders during restoration or no time at all because they didn't go out, and move to the other areas of the grid that need attention. The second is voltage island mitigation. A voltage island is when you have a substation transformer that doesn't have the ability to pick up load or be picked up by another substation transformer or a field tie. And what we looked at doing in this program is either build redundancy in the station with another transformer or in the field with field ties. The third is intelligent grid devices. These are switches and reclosers, line sensors. Basically, we're able to talk with those sensors real time, two-way communications with our operations centers. What's really nice about that, not only seeing real-time data, but is when we couple that with our FLISR system, which I'll talk about in a minute, we actually get a self-healing grid. Let's go ahead and talk about FLISR for a second. And basically that stands for fault location, isolation, and service restoration. And this is a computer-based system that utilizes the information from the intelligent grid devices in the field. It looks at an electronic distribution model and uses that two-way communication to automatically isolate outages and reroute power quickly to restore our customers. It's like a computer-controlled loop scheme, but it takes us to the next level. It does a really good job of accurately identifying fault locations. It looks at the circuits in real time, even if switching has occurred. And it allows us to isolate that fault very quickly through additional sectionalizing points and deploying automated switching restoration. Next is the voltage optimization enablement. If we can lower the voltage at the substation by 2 volts, Our customers on that line will see about a 1% energy usage savings without seeing any difference in their service level. But we do have some customers that are at the lower end of the allowable voltage area or just outside of it that we have to do some work in the field to correct that in order to be able to do the voltage optimization. So then we move on to Gus's area and what he's responsible for. First is substation technology deployment. That's looking at our oldest substations and rebuilding and modernizing those so that we can gain visibility through the operation centers of what's going on in those substations that we currently don't have visibility today. And it includes upgrading relays to electronic relays and being able to have reverse power flows on our systems that are created by DER, such as Gus has already discussed. The second is physical substation security. Doing a lot of investing here in security control message, trying to manage the threat to the grid and protect us from physical distribution substation attacks. It looks at improved fencing, improved entry points, and cameras at those stations. Next is the targeted corridor program that uses herbicide application and ash tree removal along the right-of-ways. The third component in the targeted corridor program is a program that evaluates the risk of danger trees utilizing satellite imagery and analysis. All of this to help mitigate and limit the amount of vegetation-related outages that we see. And then moving on to hosting capacity, it's an analysis using computer simulations that looks at our grid and helps developers that are looking to build DERs on our grid, such as solar generation, so that they can actually place it on a grid that the grid can actually accommodate those facilities. And what we've done is provided an interactive map for those developers to be able to use. Lastly, is the Enterprise Asset Management System, or EAMS. This is a system that will house information on our distribution assets from the time it goes in to work that is done on those devices, to operational data, to inspections, to maintenance data, that really gives us a good look at that device and its useful life. It helps us also with being proactive in our maintenance for those devices. So now if we move on to other areas in the earlier phases that have been completed or are finishing up at this point, the first being the LOX campus microgrid. And a microgrid is a group of different interconnected loads, such as DERs, that basically act as a small power grid. They're able to operate when they're connected to the main power grid, but they can also operate as an island amongst themselves and disconnect themselves from the main grid when there's an interruption to the supply being delivered by the utility. And this project is actually being built near Petersburg and incorporates the Petersburg district office and several transmission facilities on that campus. Next is a smart charging infrastructure pilot program. EVs are becoming more commonplace on our system. What this program looks to do is to be able to provide us with data and tools to be able to understand and manage future EV charging loads. The program looks at giving rebates to 4 distinct segments of customers within our service territory. First is public fast charging, second is multifamily, then workplace and transit. And the one other piece of this program that it contains is it allows for Dominion to build and own up to 4 charging stations to support electrification in the rideshare market. The next one is customer education, really on focusing on getting information out to our customers on the GT plan projects themselves. And we've done a lot through publishing of information, easy to understand content, websites, social media, digital direct mail, bill insert, public webinars, video through our customer service organizations. This program will be rolled into each individual program that we continue to educate our customers, but it'll be done at the program level and not as a standalone program. And then a few other programs that will continue on into phase 3 of the grid transformation program. The first one is AMI, or smart meters. But these are the new meters that we're installing on services that enable two-way communications and allow us to gather energy usage data. We're able to remotely read and get data from these meters. We can send commands to these meters and issue inquiries and upgrades to the individual meters themselves. Second is telecommunication. This is allowing us to build a secure and reliable telecommunications network that will help enable some of these grid transformation projects that require real-time communications. A lot of fiber being built at this point to our offices and substations, but want to make sure that it's not confused with the rural broadband program that is handled separately from the grid transformation plan. Next, it's the Customer Information Platform, or CIP. This is the replacement for CBMS and is the primary system that helps us with metering, billing, credit service orders, revenue reporting. And CIP not only will replace CBMS, but will also replace some other customer-facing applications. The next one is Distributed Energy Resource Management System, or DERMS. And this is the computer application that will monitor and control and help us optimize the increasing level of DERs, such as solar, on the company system. And it's really to help just make sure that we maintain a safe and reliable grid. And then substation cybersecurity. This is the piece that goes along with the substation physical security projects and typically our work in conjunction with them. But it's the cyber controls that we put in place to make sure that we are protected from cyber attacks. And then I'll round out the discussion with two new programs that we're proposing for phase 3 approval. So first is the Non-Wires Alternative Program, which looks at using energy storage solutions to avoid traditional solutions such as infrastructure upgrades. The second is an outage management system. This system we're looking to put in place will create a dynamic electronic model of our system that takes into account abnormal situations, switching, and whatnot to help us in our outage analysis real time during a storm. And this system will replace TRSI.
Thank you for highlighting all those programs and initiatives. It's remarkable how many Dominion Energy has to shore up the grid of the future. Gus, to give me an idea how the programs and initiatives Steve just highlighted will work together to ultimately lead to a more resilient and reliable grid.
Sure. So as Steve has laid out, there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of initiatives that fall under our grid transformation plan. I want to give everyone an idea of kind of how all these pieces fit together and some of the dependency. What we're looking at here and what we're building is kind of an ecosystem for a modernized grid. So what does that mean? Steve laid out a bunch of different parts and pieces. They all have their individual initiatives, but they're all very much connected. So I'll give you a few examples. If we look at main feeder hardening, we talked about hardening our distribution infrastructure, making sure that not only is the infrastructure more resilient, but if we do have an outage, we have quicker restoration times. That really works hand in hand with some of our targeted corridor improvement efforts with our herbicide ground floor spraying and looking to remove invasive species and non-compatible species of vegetation from some of our right-of-ways, making it easier for our crews to get in should they need to get to distribution infrastructure and make restoration efforts. The other part of that is our ash tree remediation program, which is looking to remove dead or dying trees that have been affected by the emerald ash borer. Those trees are in danger of falling into our distribution circuit. So remove the tree, lessen the probability of the outage itself. So those two very much work hand in hand. If you look at things like intelligent grid devices and our advanced distribution platform, which isn't grid transformational and a part of this effort, but it is really foundational and core to what we're doing in managing the distribution system overall. You pair that with our advanced metering infrastructure or smart meters, hosting capacity. We also do have some efforts around intelligent distribution planning or advanced distribution planning. All of those things serve to provide additional intelligence onto the grid, and all of them work together. So what do I mean by that? Smart meters are an input to our hosting capacity. Our hosting capacity and the smart meters then become an input to our distribution planning. The information that we derive from our intelligent grid devices feed visibility for our operators onto our ADMS system. They also feed into our OMS system. Smart meters themselves feed information. As we know, that's how we measure usage for our customers. That ties into our customer core platform. You look at things like substation technology deployment. We're looking to make some of our older low voltage substations more intelligent, more capable of accepting distributed energy resources. There is just more intelligence there, which feeds our view of the system, which gives us better operational visibility, but also gives us better visibility from a long-term planning perspective. The smart charging pilot allows us to get some chargers out there, get some information on that. That'll give us some insights into how our customers are utilizing their charging infrastructure when they purchase EVs. Also gives us some demand response capabilities as well to help us manage the load in the peaks and valleys on our system. There are a lot of things out there. It really is just an ecosystem. I can go on and on about how the intelligent devices also feed our DERM system for distributed energy resources and how we monitor and manage those. And then our enterprise asset management system, which is really looking to manage all of our assets from their inception point to their end of life, or from cradle to grave, if you will. All of these sensors and the intelligence that we're putting on the grid will feed that system as well. A lot of different parts and pieces taken by themselves. They can be seen as being individualized, but they're all interconnected. This is what the smart modernized grid means. These are how all of these things plug together and kind of work off of each other to, again, deliver a more resilient and reliable and dependable grid for our customers.
It is fascinating to see how all those pieces fit together. Thank you for that insight. Steve, can you provide a little background on how this initiative works in relation to regulatory standards, which demand filings for approvals to do this much needed work?
Sure, Nadia, and I will point out that this is a Virginia-only program at this point, so I'll stick to the Virginia process. With the exception of AMI and CIP, which will be recovered through normal base rates, Dominion decided basically to establish the bulk of these programs as rider initiatives back in the 2018 timeframe. So a rider or a rate adjustment clause is a mechanism to recover invested cost outside of the normal rate case process. And typically, the rider process allows Dominion to collect on our investments much sooner. So in order to receive regulatory approval for Virginia for riders, we must file testimony that outlines what programs are included, along with the cost and benefits for our customers. This process is extremely detailed and takes considerable effort and time, often several months before the filing. Our testimony is filed with the State Corporation Commission, or SCC. The official process is then initiated, which will take an additional 6 to 9 months to complete. The SCC staff and other interveners, including the Attorney General's office, then have the opportunity to ask formal discovery questions about the testimony, followed by our formal response. Once the discovery process is over, the SCC staff will file their testimony in response to our filing and the answers that we gave during discovery. Dominion will then counter the SCC staff's testimony with our rebuttal testimony, clarifying our stance on where we agree or disagree with the SCC staff and why. Next step is a hearing where the SCC admits into evidence any verbal or written testimony from parties that either support or oppose the programs proposed. Once the initial part of the hearing is complete, Dominion witnesses may be called to testify. It's very similar to a normal courtroom where each witness is sworn in. Lawyers from the SCC or other interveners have the opportunity to ask the witness questions on their previously submitted testimony and rebuttal. And then the SCC hearing examiner, who presides over the hearing, also has the ability to ask questions. Following the hearing, the SCC hearing examiner will issue a report on how they would recommend the SCC judges to rule in the case. And finally, the SCC judges will issue a ruling on whether they find each program of the GTP or Grid Transformation Program to be reasonable and prudent, or in other words, they approve or deny each individual program within the GTP. For the grid transformation process, this happens every 2 to 3 years. Phase 1 covered 2019 through 2021. Phase 2, which we're currently in, covered 2022 through 2023. Phase 3 will cover 2024 through 2026. And we're currently in the process of developing testimony to be filed this spring. And in Phase 4, we'll most likely cover 2027 and 2028. One other point here too, Nadia, is that Dominion must also file an annual report to the SEC outlining actual costs for projects and the metrics that show benefits of these projects.
Thank you, Steve, for thoroughly explaining that process. The last question is directed to both of you. What does success look like for our grid transformation programs? Gus, I'll start with you.
So that's a great question, Nadia. I think success looks like execution of this work and an enablement of all the things Steve and I have talked through as we've worked our way at a high level through our grid transformation plan. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and that should not be understated. Grid transformation is a 10-year effort, started back in 2018, runs through 2028. And we have several $billion worth of investments here that we are seeking approval for through all of the various filings and the initiatives that we have spun up. So there's a lot of work to be done here, but it will all benefit the grid, our customers. Success for me looks like executing all of this work, measuring and allowing our customers to see tangible benefits from the work that we have executed, and then also enabling this future where we have more electric vehicles on the road. A lot of people have more rooftop solar. Batteries at their homes are another thing that we didn't really get very much into. But it's making sure that the electric grid itself is in a position where it can provide a fertile ground for all the many things that are coming as the country and really the world sees further electrification of things in people's homes and the systems overall.
I think Gus summarized it very well. For me, success is simply defined as our customers receiving safe and reliable, resilient service at a reasonable cost. And for us, it's the selection of high-value projects that are safely and efficiently built that will help us achieve the needs of our customers. So with that, Nadia, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
I'd like to thank Steve Eisenrauch and Gus Johnson for their expertise and participation. Learn more about the Grid Transformation Plan at dominionenergy.com/grid improvement projects. Thanks for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes where we'll more deeply examine each of these programs. I'm Nadia Ely.